Late at night, chapter 181. Late at night, when the moon rises high. Strangely, it was a night when I couldn't sleep. I was sitting in my bedroom reading a book with a small light on. However, the contents of the book were not noticeable. It's been a long time since I opened the bookshelf, but it still stayed on the same page. What a book in this mood. I covered the book and threw it sideways. I knew all too well why I'm feeling down right now. Why do you keep making that expression? At times like this, I resent the fact that I can read his feelings well from his expressionless face at first glance. Before Caitlin came in, when he gets close, as if kissing, on Perez's face, there were other emotions ahead of the excitement about the situation to come. Anxiety. He was anxious as if he would lose me though I was lying right in front of me. I'll take you there. The guests are waiting. Perez, see you later. And when I turned around refusing, Perez was afraid. I can't pretend I don't know if I'm trying to pretend I don't know. Whoa, my sigh grew heavy. There was also irritation. Why was I pounding so hard? When I thought of Perez, I was angry at my heart that responded together. It was then. Knock, knock. A low knock rang through the quiet room. There was nowhere to tell who he was, but it was obvious who was standing outside the door. Thump, thump, my heart, which seemed to calm a little, jumped again. The door was opened. Hi, Perez. It was Perez who was standing drawing a long shadow in the light of the hallway. Are you okay? Perez didn't come in front of the door, but immediately looked at my face and asked. His brief gaze makes me feel strange again. It's cold at night. Come in and talk. When I said that, Perez quickly stepped inside and closed the door. I was just saying it for the guy who ran the horse at night. Perez probably took it as a sign that I was cold. I sat next to Perez and prepared the tea, just like I always did when he came. Between the teacup and the clatter of preparing the kettle, Perez said, I'm sorry I came to you all of a sudden, Tia. You don't have to be sorry. I laughed brightly on purpose, but the smile didn't last long because Caitlin said that your complexion is not good. Caitlin has good eyes. After encountering each other this afternoon, she returned to the palace and immediately informed Perez, really, I'm fine. Why would Caitlin say that? But the moment I said that, a teapot slipped out of my hands. Oops, it wasn't dangerous. However, as the teacup fell, hot water almost flowed into my dress. But that did not happen. It was because his hand wrapped around the falling teacup. Of course, the hot tea water had spilled over into Perez's hands. Perez! It was hotter than usual because the night air was chilly. You're so. If he had left it alone, he wouldn't have been hurt, and so I am. I'm wearing a thick robe over my pajamas, so it's probably wetting the hem a little. But why? I quickly took the teacup out of Perez's hand and wiped it off with a towel, and I shouted at Perez, why are you being so reckless? What if you get really hurt? It's better than you getting hurt. Perez, you. I was speechless. No matter how many calluses you have, you'll definitely feel pain. There was no sign of such pain in Perez's face. His eyes were only looking at me. Even now, I could see how angry I was at myself, and I was looking at it with careful eyes. I lowered my head a little, prevented Perez from seeing my face, and wiped his hands more carefully. In the meantime, his skin became redder. It looks like it hurts. Not really. Perez replied and looked at the hem of my robe. It was to make sure that there was no hot water splashing. I got emotional. You're going to feel a lot of pain for a while. It's okay. It might even get blisters. It's okay. It could be a scar. It's okay, Tia. What's all right about that? Eventually, I let out a loud voice. I could feel Perez's red eyes staring at me. Perez, why do you keep? I couldn't speak very well. All kinds of emotions and thoughts seemed to have gathered in my heart. I sat with my mouth shut because I thought something strange would pop up if I did something wrong, without even realizing that my hand was holding Perez's hand tightly. Then Perez swept away my hair with his uninjured hand. It was a friendly and somber touch. I like you, Tia, Perez said. You're the most precious thing to me, so don't cry. Excuse me. Only then did I realize the fact that I'm crying. Drop. I could feel a drop of tears running down my right cheek. Perez looked at me with distressed eyes somewhere and carefully wiped my tears with his fingers. Don't cry, but Perez's words were of no use. Tears kept falling down. Perez, huh? Why? Why do you like me? Perez has wrinkles on his forehead, and he answered, You gave me the world. I could feel his big hand surrounding my right cheek, affectionately. He told me I had to leave. Perez's eyes smiled. Somehow the image of a young man overlapped, the little man that looked at me with the grass around his mouth. So, from that day on, Perez kissed my forehead and rubbed his forehead to mine carefully. I lived for you, Tia. Perez's nose stuck on the tip of my nose. I can't help but love you. Do you love me? My asking voice was dumb and trembling. From the moment we first met, there was a laugh in his voice. You were my world. I overlapped my lips on Perez's lips. The tears that flowed through it permeated the salty taste, but it didn't matter. I grabbed his shirt and pulled him as close as I could, bringing his lips. I could see that my lips, which were out of breath with the scent of Perez, and my fingertips holding his shirt, were trembling finely, and Perez's big hand covered my hand. He held my trembling hand. Sigh. A small breath eventually burst out of my mouth in my heart. pounding as if I had been running. And as if it were a signal, Perez began to move. His hand, which was wrapped in a towel, suddenly released freely and penetrated between my neck and hair. His hard fingers touched the line of my chin and my earlobe. Every time he did that, I felt like a spark was flying inside me. Every time Perez's lips rushed through my lips. Ha! Every time the tip of his tongue touches me, like beating and flinting. Before I knew it, I wrapped my arm around Perez's neck. Our bodies were in contact without an inch of the gap. Tia, the flame kept growing as Perez called me in a low voice. Even though his hands reached go down my waist and grabbed me with a strong grip, he'll quickly release his strength. Even that hesitation as if he was afraid if I would break, even the thirst that comes again when I'm out of breath and he takes off his lips and retreat. All have been handed down to me. Huh. Perez took off his lips when I was having a hard time. However, his rough fingers rubbed my lips continuously. When I opened my eyes slightly, I encountered red eyes looking at me as if I was possessed. There was only me in it. The only thing I could see was his burning eyes. But for a moment, his eyes shook. Perez, why? In a low, rough voice, Perez asked me, why are you grieving? And before I knew it, I looked at my new tears. I'm crying. Perhaps Perez was more distressed. I said, as Perez had done for me, sweeping his cheeks tenderly, I'm going to be a matriarch, Perez. I know, and you must ascend the throne. I suppose so. How can I not be sad when we see the end of us like that? My heart is trembling like this. It says, I want to be with him. I want to give up everything for me. I want him to give up everything for me, even though I know I can't. I want to pour out such selfish greed. I kissed Perez's lips once again. It's different from before. It was a careful kiss. Tia. He looked into my eyes to see if he felt it too. The imperial law does not prevent the second son from becoming emperor. It's just that there's no precedent, and it doesn't stop a woman from becoming a householder. I spoke in a calm voice as much as I could, but as a householder, she can't be the empress. More precisely, the moment she become empress, the woman loses all her inheritance rights, just as it is absorbed as an imperial existence. The name of the family from which they were born can only leave a trace as the middle name. I put mine on Perez's forehead and said, I'll choose my family again and again, Perez. I'll choose Lombardy. I didn't want to lie to him. Perez's long eyelashes were seen shaking. I'm sorry, I said it with all my heart. However, stop. Perez also kissed me and said, Don't be sad anymore, Tia. Warm hands approached me preciously. You don't have to be sad because of that. What do you mean? Perez looked at me silently. To me, a world that cannot be with you is meaningless. Perez's voice was low. So I'm thinking of changing the world, so you don't have to worry, Tia. The man who said so rubbed his face against my neck and my slanted hair. Don't be sad. A red rose-like scent came to swallow me. When you're sad, it's like someone's cutting my heart with a knife, Perez said, hugging me tightly. So don't be sad, Tia. So I didn't see his red eyes cast a cruel light. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lombardy Scholarship Day. The mansion was as noisy as always on a scholarship day. Looking out of the window, more people were arriving, even though it was held earlier than it had been scheduled. I leaned against the window sill and was looking down for a moment when I heard a knock. Come on in. Come on in. The door opened quietly with my permission. Lady Florentia, welcome, Caitlin. Caitlin, who came into the room first, stood aside and I saw the person standing behind her. I greeted her gladly even when I saw her. Welcome to Lombardy's mansion, Miss Ramona. Ramona, who has beautiful red hair and blue eyes, looked nervous. No, I'm going to call it properly now. I approached and smiled, reaching out one hand for a handshake. Welcome, Lady Ramona Brown. End of chapter 181. Oh my god. Chapter 182. The outdoor banquet hall, where many people gathered, was noisy with one topic. Isn't it beautiful? It's as if it's alive. All the people who poured out their exclamations were looking at the center of the green garden. There was a large wooden sculpted figure of a woman looking at a small tree growing out of branches. I've heard about Alpha Eugene's reputation, but I didn't expect it to be this much. I don't know who that woman is, but doesn't she seem to be full of her affection for trees? But why such a small tree, not a grown one? At a time when people are eager to talk about the statue, a coachman who came to Lombardy from the imperial office with a low-ranking official from the Lombardy scholarship entered the mansion, a face with a shabby outfit and a rough beard. The only unusual thing about the coachman, which is common everywhere in the empire, was that his right-hand sleeve was loosely draped. Tuck, tuck. He walked up the stairs without hesitation, looking indifferently at the crowd outside in colorful clothes, and he reached one door with a natural step. It was Lord of Lombardy's office. For some reason, the door with the fully armed Lombardy's knights was empty. Whoa, the coachman, who let out a low sigh, knocked carefully on the door. Come in. The voice of Lulak Lombardy, the owner of the office, was heard. As soon as he entered the office, the coachman holding his hat on his chest bent down deeply and straightened his head. Huh. Lulak, who was watching, laughed. Did you really become a commoner after leaving as a commoner? I'm sorry. The coachman smiled awkwardly. Lulak Lombardi stood up and tapped the coachman on the shoulder. Long time no see, Gilliard Brown. No, now that you've succeeded the family, I'll have to properly call you Lord of Brown. Gilliard Brown laughed bitterly at a name no one else is calling now. Thank you for your time, Lord Lombardi. Sit down. Lulak personally gave the tea he had prepared, and he said, looking closely at Gilliard Brown, you must have a hard time. I feel like I'm lucky to be alive. Gilliard Brown's gaze was cut off and stayed where his right hand was. Lulak also watched the scene and asked, it must be Angenes. They've done a terrible job. It was more than 40 years ago that Angenes took all the land of the Brown family. Since then, Angenes has dried up the Brown family. They forced him out of the estate and killed Gilliard Brown's father, the Lord of Brown, who was in charge of a nearby estate. The background has never been clarified, but no one didn't know that there were Angenes behind it. I'd rather die humanely, Lulak said with his tongue flicked. Despite the harsh words, Gilliard Brown did not lose his temper. Over the past years, there have been many nights when he thought it would have been lucky to die that night together. They take the right hand of the one who lifts the sword. The killer sent by Angenes killed only the young Brown family, their first son, and adult men who could succeed the family. The Lord of Brown's younger brother, who survived difficult times at that time, had both legs cut off, and boys, including Gilliard, had to lose their right hand. They were survivors and witnesses forced to remain silent. But you survived, Lulak said to Gilliard Brown. Only those who survive can sharpen the blade of revenge. Brown's shoulder was shaken upon the word. He was surprised that Lulak knew everything, even though he hadn't brought it up yet. Lulak's deep brown eyes filled with a strange smile. Say it yourself. Why did you want to see me today? And he added, looking at Gilliard Brown's stiffly nervous face, don't worry about Angenes. These days they're been busy. They're busy putting out my tailed fire. Now that I've held the scholarship, don't worry about the leak of your visit to me today. Thank you. Gilliard Brown bowed his head deep, and in that state he spoke earnestly. Please help the Brown family, Elder. How? I have found a way to get back the land that was taken away by Angenes, but before that, I must regain my name. Angenes eventually succeeded in removing the Browns from the aristocratic register 10 years ago. Strictly speaking, now the Browns are no longer aristocrats, so please help me get my name back to aristocracy. I'm ashamed, but I am. Lulak stroked the white beard slowly. So what does Lombardi gain? The Brown family who succeeded in the aristocracy will be Lombardi's internal allies. Ha ha ha. Lulak burst into laughter. Where else can you find empty promises like that? Now the Brown family, which can't be found in the aristocratic register allies, at that moment, Lulak's eyes became sharp. Decide, what do you believe? What do I believe in you, who have become the second prince man? Oh, Gilliard Brown was engulfed in vain. Did that wolf say that? You can't use your power in the aristocracy, so you go to Lombardy and throw an empty promise. I'm sorry. Gilliard Brown was unable to speak, because it was as Lulak said. Meeting the Lord of Lombardy was the idea of the second prince, and it was right to use Lombardy's friendship with the Brown family in the past. Lulak's lips were quietly twisted while watching Lord of Brown, who seemed guilty at first glance. You're lucky, yes? Gilliard Brown's eyes opened wide. Fortunately, I don't like the way Anjanas is doing these days. Elder than Lulak did not answer for a moment and rang the bell. Butler John came into the office. Lulak looked at him and said, Get Tia here. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Did you know? Ramona Brown's voice trembled. Yes. Since when? No, how? I just smiled instead of answering. Ramona. Caitlin approached and gently touched Ramona's shoulder. It was an act that seemed to soothe the confusion of Ramona, but it wasn't. Now Caitlin is telling Ramona to stop prying questions. I'm sorry, Lady Florentia. I can tell by looking at her apologizing instead of Ramona. No, Caitlin, and I looked at Ramona and Caitlin side by side and said, You two look a lot alike. Caitlin, who has a neat and modest appearance, and Ramona, who is tall, with red hair, blue eyes, and a colorful appearance, are very different. But the good eyes and the straight atmosphere were very similar. In my previous life, Caitlin asked my grandfather to help the Browns, but my grandfather refused, and eventually Caitlin chose to be Perez's man entirely. It would have been a very difficult and painful decision for Caitlin, who has a lot of affection and loyalty for Lombardi, but eventually Caitlin chose the family. Ramona became Perez's official lover, and the Brown family was successfully reinstated, becoming the West's leading family instead of the Andenes. Then the Lord of Brown would be meeting my grandfather right now. Ramona was surprised at my words once again. I'm not going to tell you how I knew again. Oh, Ramona blushed quietly. Oh, she may be angry at me who knows all her secrets and her family, but I don't tell her how I knew it half teasingly. However, Ramona had no sign of it. The lake-like blue eyes only deepened her curiosity toward me. Shall we sit down first? I led two people to the drawing room. But Caitlin, can I ask you a question? Yes, go ahead. Why did you want to introduce Lady Ramona Brown to me? In fact, it was the most incomprehensible part. It was better for her to take Ramona to my grandfather rather than me and make an impression at least once. Caitlin thought for a moment and answered my question. Because you're an important person. Important person, Caitlin nodded. At present, Lady Lombardi is the most powerful person in the Lumbro Empire, except for Lord Lombardi. All right, Caitlin was Paris' maid. Of course, Paris would never have told Caitlin about me, but it is Caitlin who has been assisting Paris right next to him for a long time. So there are a lot of things she naturally knows about. Probably, there are things she knows about me as well as she can guess. Perhaps Caitlin hadn't even given details to her nephew. Given Ramona's reaction of alternating between me and Caitlin with her surprised eyes, as a maid of the royal family, she fulfilled her duty to keep a close silence on what she learned during her duties. That's Caitlin. I nodded, feeling strangely proud. So, I think Ramona can learn a lot from such a figure of Lady Florentia. I looked at Ramona. I already know that Ramona likes Perez. You can't help but notice it at a glance. But what's that Ramona could learn from me? Can I see your hand for a second? I spoke to Ramona. Ramona, who hesitated for a while, reached out to me. You didn't let go of the sword. Ramona is a member of the Brown family, and with Perez, she learned swordsmanship at the academy. But that's also a story from years ago. As an employee of the Monarch Top, she would have lived a busy life moving from place to place, but the Calyuses still remained in Ramona's hands. Caitlin also trained in swordsmanship, but it was a little different from when she entered the palace and became a maid of honor. I don't skip a day of training. Ramona shook her head and replied, I am the daughter of the Brown family. I could tell from Ramona's clear answer the meaning of what Caitlin said. Somehow I thought I was going to laugh. It was then, knock knock. John the butler came in with a low knock and said with a polite bow, The Lord is calling for the Lady Florentia. End of chapter 182. Chapter 183. Lord of Lombardy's office. Go get Tia. Lulak's words crossed Gilliard Brown's face. It was because he didn't understand of him calling his granddaughter, not his daughter, Shananette. Seeing that such a question appeared on his face, Lulak asked, Is it strange that I suddenly called my granddaughter? No, it's not like that. Wait and see. Soon you'll know why I called the kid. Lulak laughed as if he was having fun. After a while, a woman came in with a small knock. She was an impressive woman with long curved brown hair and large green eyes. And the moment he met her eyes, Gilliard Brown could see the meaning of what the Lord of Lombardy said a while ago. Her eyes were so intense enough to make him avoid her gaze without knowing it. It was an overbearing feeling as if dealing with the Lord of Lombardy. And that's not the end of his surprise. Oh ho ho, is Tia here? Lulak, who had been exuding momentum like a wild beast until a while ago, has become unstoppable. Is this really the Lord of Lombardy? Gilliard Brown's jaw dropped at the sight of Lulak's eyes dripping with affection. Come on, sit down. Does his granddaughter even have a leg ache? Lulak quickly pointed to the fluffy sofa and said, and before sitting down, she looked at Gilliard Brown and greeted him with a smile. Hello, Lord Brown. Nice to meet you. Oh, hello, Lady Lombardy. It was even before he introduced himself, so Gilliard Brown greeted each other in a little embarrassment. It was a strange thing. He is sure that the lady is still young. However, it was very difficult to deal with. I'm sure Tia knows something about the Brown family, and today the Lord of Brown asked Lombardy for help. The Lord made a good choice. At Lulak's words, Tia said calmly. There was no sign of surprise. Lula quietly swallowed a smile at the sight and said it like a throw. I will leave the Brown family's matters to you, Tia. Elder, the Lord of Brown was surprised and called my grandfather. Excuse me. And called my grandfather, but I didn't look back on it. I'm sorry, but it wasn't the Lord of Brown's mood that mattered to me. My grandfather was staring at me, the fate of the family. This is to observe how I react to the enormous task thrown out of nowhere. Yes, I understand, I answered calmly. Then grandfather's eyebrows moved small. My grandfather was rather surprised because I wasn't surprised. Grandpa, how do you think of me? Come, I covered my mouth with my rolled hands and coughed softly. Otherwise, I thought I'd burst into laughter. I can see why my grandfather gave me the task of Brown's family without having to think twice. It's the beginning of my test, a test to prove that I have the qualities to be a matriarch. I looked at the Lord of Brown, who was still stunned. He was once a swordsman with a promising future, but his right hand was cut off and he has lived as a commoner. Therefore there is no aristocratic aspect from my perspective, such as slightly curved shoulders and unconfident eyes. If I introduce him to the aristocratic society again, they will be eaten quickly by the aristocrats who are waiting for red meat, leaving only bones. Until the Browns successfully reinstated and became the representative family of the West again. The most important thing is public opinion. It will be more difficult than you might think to get the nobles, full of privileged consciousness, to accept the family that once became a commoner as a member of the aristocratic society again. However, Lord Brown, please tell me, Lady Lombardy. His good eyes are full of anxiety. He doesn't believe me yet. I wasn't offended. It's a matter of course. As long as my grandfather left the Brown family to me, I will do my best to help the Lord. But you have to remember one thing, I said with a smile to the Lord of Brown. Always raise your head, straighten your shoulders, and now you're a householder worthy of the name of the Brown family name. His blue eyes, similar to Ramona, shook for a moment, but the silence was not long. A moment later, Gilliard Brown replied, Thanks for your help, Lady Lombardy. It was still awkward, but his eyes and voice were quite different from before. I like it very much. I smiled face to face and answered, Don't mention it, Lord Brown. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Empress Rabini, Claravan, and Luigi and Jenna sat in one place at the Empress Palace. You can stamp your family seal here, Claravan said and pointed to a corner of the paper on the table. The words of Laurentia were true. Today was the day to write a formal contract because things went smoothly after putting a connection in the Pellet Corporation. Debt Lombardy is now gone, and Pellet Corporation took the bonds. With little interest, it was just a nail-sized land in the western corner as collateral. Besides, contrary to what was said, she liked the man Clarivan Pellet. It was especially so that he kept manners like a sword, not only for his beautiful appearance, but also for a merchant. I must have misunderstood Pellet Corporation. Empress Rabini smiled with satisfaction. She thought Pellet Corporation was on Lombardy's side. But after seeing the contract he brought today, Empress Rabini was convinced. Pellet Corporation wants to build a bridge in Angenas too. If it's a misunderstanding. I thought that Pellet Corporation had such a close relationship with Lombardy that he would not do business with Angenas. Rabini answered out of the blue on purpose. When the Empress said that, he tends to panic most of the time. And the other day, there was trivial woodwork. She even brought up the past on purpose. It's true that the Pallet Corporation has received a lot of Lombardy's help to get this far, but we can't stay in Lombardy forever. Also, the work of the Triva tree was very different from my will. Also, at the words of Clarivan, the Empress smiled inwardly. It's all in the past, so I don't care. Thank you, Empress. Rabini nodded and pulled out the family seal. Then we'll wrap up the contract. Oh, wait, but the Clarivan suddenly stopped the Empress. The Lord of Angenes must be the one who put stamp here. The Empress' face hardened coldly. But Clarivan did not back down. I'm sorry, Empress. However, the seal is effective only when it is imprinted by the state. Yes, the Empress handed over the seal of the Angenes family to Luigi with a cold look. You do it. Luigi Angenes accepted the seal with a slightly embarrassing yet smiling face. Should I stamp it here? Yes, that's right, Lord Angenes. Luigi pressed the seal and took it. He smiled slightly because it looked good that the pattern of the Angenes came out clearly and upright. So that's it. Clarivan took his share of the contract and bowed deeply to the Empress. I look forward to seeing you again, Empress. Then he looked back at Luigi and Janice and said, It's my first time to visit the Imperial Palace. If you are okay, would you please show me the way out? At Clarivan's request, Luigi nodded, albeit slightly surprised. It was because he liked him quite a bit. I'm on my way out, so I'll accompany you. The two walked down the hall, leaving the Empress. Then when they were halfway there, Clarivan, who was briefly taking out the contract that came out, said in surprise, Oh my, why, what's going on? I wrote the wrong date on the contract by mistake. If you look here, the contract date is incorrectly written as last year. Even so, does that matter? Yes, this will make the contract ineffective under imperial law. I can fix the date on my own. Oh my God, Luigi Ongenes, who had been flicking his tongue, said, pointing to the path he had taken. Then let's go back now and tell the Empress. No, you don't have to. Clarivan shook his hand and said, Without bothering the Empress, I will visit the Angenes tomorrow with a new contract. But Luigi Angenes showed signs of difficulty to sign a contract without the Empress, but Clarivan shrugged and said, In fact, it doesn't matter with or without the Empress. It's not an important issue. I came to the palace today just for courtesy's sake. It is the Angenes family that Pellet Corporation is signing, not the Empress. Such Luigi nodded inwardly as he stretched his word. That's right, Angenes is not his sister, but he is. Then Clarivan snapped at him. Under imperial law, the Empress has no right to the Angenes family. At the moment, it was a very brief moment in the eyes of Luigi and Janice that something crossed his mind. Then he burst into laughter and nodded. Yeah, then come to the mansion tomorrow. I'll rewrite the contract. Yes, I am ashamed to bother you with my mistakes. Clarivan's mouth, with his head bowed, had a quiet smile. End of chapter 183. Chapter 184. I walked out of my grandfather's office with the Lord of Brown. There were people waiting for us. It was Caitlin and Ramona. Father! Ramona quickly approached and hugged the Lord of Brown tightly. Ramona, the Lord of Brown swept his daughter's back with only one hand left. It's been a long time since you've had a reunion. Caitlin, who was wiping away tears with a handkerchief, replied to my words. The last time we met was before Ramona entered the academy, so we were separated for a long time. Perhaps it was a wise choice, as Rabini was as cruel as the former Lord of Angenas, who slaughtered the Brown family. The Lord of Brown changed his status to a commoner and drove a carriage to the capital. If the Empress had known that his daughter had likewise changed her identity and became a confidant of Perez in the academy, it could be sure that this reunion today would not have happened. You've grown up before I know it. I couldn't recognize you even if I have you as a guest in my carriage. The Lord of Brown smiled bitterly and said jokingly, Why is your face so sad? I'm fine. Before they knew it, tears were in the eyes of the father and daughter. They were a good-looking father and daughter who looked just like each other with good faces smiling. I took a step back from the Brown family and called my grandfather's butler, John. Yes, lady. My grandfather guest and my guest arranged a place for them to stay in the mansion, out of the eyes of the employee so that the guests can relax. Yes, I will. John understood all my instructions, even if I didn't elaborate. John, who knew the Lombardy mansion better than I probably did at Deacon, Probably did as a deacon in charge of it, was also quick. Space for the three Browns is ready in a blink of an eye. Located on the top floor of the huge main building, the space was a great place for three family members to stay. I'm sorry, but Lord Brown must refrain from going outside and stay here from today. At my words, the Lord of Brown opened his eyes wide. To successfully restore the Brown family's identity, it's all about keeping secrets until the time comes. Besides, I said with a calm eye, but frankly, looking at the appearance of the Lord Brown needs to be prepared because you cannot stand before the nobles like this. Well, yes, no, that's right. The Lord of Brown habitually changed his words in a hurry to speak formally to me. He also swept the shabby clothes he was wearing with his hands. To be honest, now the Lord of Brown was nothing short of a commoner. Even if it was a little better than the first time, it was still a sloppy posture and tone. More than 40 years ago, the death of the former Lord of Brown occurred when the Lord of Brown was still a child. It was inevitable that he lived as a commoner longer than as a nobleman. I will select some trustworthy people and I'm going to put you up with a teacher. You're going to have a hard time for a while. And Caitlin, yes, Lady Florentia, stay here for a few days and teach this and that to Lord Brown and the lady. It was fortunate that there would be a great teacher named Caitlin who couldn't be hired even with money. I'll tell Perez. When Perez name came out, Ramona was seen flinching slightly, but I greeted them like I didn't see it and came out. Outside the room, John the butler, who guided us here, was still waiting. There will be many things they need, so please attach one as someone with a heavy mouth. Yes, lady. Then a small laugh leaked out of the room. It was the sound of a happy family. I added to John, from food to clothes, please be careful not to lack anything. There are people who have suffered for a long time. If they're here, they'll be able to talk about things they've been unable to talk about for at least a few days, without worrying about being caught. At some point, without worrying that someone is after their life. I will, Lady Florentia. Somehow, leaving behind John looking at me with warm eyes, I took a step. Since my grandfather's death started, there was no time to waste. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next day at the Angenes mansion. Check it out. Clarivan handed out the new contract to Luigi Angenes. Then I'll see it for a second. Lord of Angenes put down the contract he had kept and the new one Clarivan had brought on the table side by side. Then he read through the pages one by one and poked his head in satisfaction. After Clarivan Pallet's words to rewrite the contract, and he agreed with it. He then regretted it in his heart. He was so nervous that he didn't know what Clarivan was up to. Contrary to his concerns, however, the new contract was no different from the previous one. Luigi and Jenna sneaked a look at Clarivan. Anyway, it was because he was informed that Pellet Corporation was suspicious. Did you check everything? Contrary to the idea of anger, Clarivan was smiling leisurely, leaning comfortably against the back of his chair. The displeasure was not seen on his face. Rather, he pointed out the clause in large letters at the very end of the contract with his finger. This part here is the most important. If Angenis fails to repay the interest and principal, the owner of the Pallet Corporation becomes the owner of the estate of Hen Forek, which is the collateral. Have you confirmed it? I confirmed it. Please also read the terms below, Clarivan said, referring to the list of details of interest and principal payments. What a thorough man you are. The Lord of Angenis said with a big smile, but things are difficult for a while now, and the land of Angenis as collateral will not fall. I suppose. After a very brief silence, Clarivan smiled and replied along with the Lord of Angenis. Now, do I have to stamp the seal? Yes, it is. The subsequent process was also easy, as in the previous Empress Palace. All he had to do was press down the seal of Lord of Angenes. That's great. Luigi Angenes was proud to have done something great as a lord. It was really worth feeling after a long time. Then he suddenly saw something unique in the contract and asked Clarivan. So the contractor is not Clarivan Pellet, but the owner of Pellet? When asked by the Lord of Angenes, Clarivan's hand stopped for a moment while he was packing the contract. Yes, that's right, but Luigi Angenes, who was still only looking at the seal of his own, didn't notice it. It's like the seal of the Lord to me. Pallet Corporation is like my family. Oh, well, it's more reliable. Thank you for your kindness. Clarivan deliberately continued his unseemly conversation with the Lord of Angenes. I hope it helps Angenes in times of need. It was helpful, is that all? Ha ha. Then stealthily, he lifted the previous contract in front of the Lord of Angenes and approached the fireplace. If you need me, I can lend you more money, so just let me know. Well, really? Yes, that's what business is all about. There is a saying that debt is also an asset. Oh, then I'll burn this. Standing in front of the fireplace, Clarivan took a bundle of previous contracts near the fire and asked, I'll do it, but to some extent to funds. Angenes, who was already tempted to hear that he could lend more money, shook his hand. At the same time, the previous contract fell into a red fireplace fire. Clarivan slid Luigi and Janice's words into one ear. Instead, he looked down at the paper that was quickly becoming white ash with cold eyes. There is only one difference between the contract written in front of the Empress and the new contract made today. Instead of Clarivan Pellet Seal, it was just that it was taken by the owner of the Pellet Corporation. However, he had to be careful again and again in front of the quick-witted Empress. It was difficult to start suspicion that Clarivan himself may not be the owner of the Pellet Corporation. How fortunate it is that Luigi and Janice is less than half of the Empress counterparts. So what I want to ask you is, can I lend money to myself Not my family. Clarivan smiled broadly at the Lord of Angenes, who was flushed with greed for money. End of chapter 184. Chapter 185. It's just a time for the morning to show its face. I leaned against the doorway and asked, So, Perez, why are you here now? Unknowingly, the sound of half-coldly laughter was mixed into the words. For Caitlin. He answered well without changing his expression. Tia sent me a letter that Caitlin should stay in your mansion longer because of the Brown family. Explain it better. If Caitlin, who usually doesn't take personal leave, suddenly doesn't show up at the palace for days, the Empress will doubt it. So what? So if I'm staying at Lombardi's mansion to spend time with my fiancé, Tia, so there will be no doubt that Caitlin, my maid in honor, has emptied the palace. There's a secretly shameless part of this guy. I crossed my arms and squinted and asked, Really? There's not a single reason for your self-interest, is that really all? Perez smiled at my question and shut up. It was a method that he often used when he couldn't lie to me and wanted to avoid answering. Come in for now. I really can't let this be. I moved away from the door that was blocking the way. Then he hurriedly walked into the house before I changed my mind. It's been a long time since I've been loosened with a smile on my cheek. But Caitlin would still love it. She was worried about you, I said, leaning sideways against the back of the sofa in the drawing room. In fact, I was still wearing a thick robe in my pajamas. I don't think I've ever had another guest in this state. Well, it's Perez. The morning temperature was chilly, so I hugged my knees and curled up. That was all, but before I knew it, the robe Perez was wearing fell silently on my shoulder. I told you, I'm here for Caitlin. Perez shuddered halfway like that. Then naturally he sat facing me in the seat right next to me. It was close enough to reach Perez's knee and my toes. Oh my god, at that moment I realized that we're sitting in the same shape as that night a while ago. I bit my mouth in nervousness for some reason, but my move seemed to have caught his attention. I could see red eyes following me as if they were attracted to my lips. I never meant to provoke him. His relaxed smile disappeared from his face, which was looking at me with my head folded with one arm. And he reached out to me. Shocking. I was a little nervous without realizing it, but Paris' hand only opened his robe more meticulously over my shoulder. Oh, it's embarrassing. In an instant, I could feel my face burning up enough not to need a robe, but the look on his face was extraordinary. It was a face that was very dissatisfied with me, that the smooth edges of his eyes were slightly raised, like the tip of the brush. You hate me? Sure enough, Paris' voice was full of anxious signs. No, not like that. I don't do anything meaningless to deny my feelings about him. I'm still nervous. I rubbed the robe with my hands underneath my heart-throbbing collarbone, pretending to fit the robe tighter. It didn't make a difference though. Do you like me then? Perez asked as he approached me a little further. Thump, thump, thump. Perez's scent, resembling the scent of roses, was breathless. This wasn't my original plan. I was going to treat Perez the way I used to when I brought him into the room a while ago, as if nothing had happened that night. Perez told me not to worry, but I couldn't. I like him too, but if the moment of choice comes, I won't hesitate to choose Lombardi. Even though I know how deep and blind Perez's heart is towards me, I couldn't just listen to Perez and act as if there were no problems, even though I knew I wouldn't be able to fully repair that heart. It was not the right thing to do. By the way, Perez's body leaned a little further towards me. At the same time, I could feel his big, warm hands clasped around my naked toes and feet. Tia, Perez whispered to me. The red eyes were only looking at me, and there was something about the look that made me cry. Perez, why are you so pretty? What the hell do you believe in? The words behind me were swallowed without speaking out, but Perez laughed with his eyes as if he could hear the sound in my heart. Eventually, our lips overlapped. His big body hugged me completely and kissed me for a long time. Huh, at the scent that comes through, at body temperature, and at the sound of a breath that passes by, I even forgot where I am now. And when I came to my senses, I was sitting on Perez's lap. Huh, oh no, hold on. I took off my lips that wouldn't come off like a magnet, and hurriedly blocked his with my hands. Let's get a hold of ourselves. Huh, huh. Looking into the eyes of a guy who hasn't lost any heat yet, the dizzying temptation struck me over and over again, but I overcame it. I swear it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Oh, we can't do this. Why? Perez asked, slowly rubbed under my finger. With a stealthy touch burning my hands, I jumped out of my seat and fell far from the sofa. Damn it, I couldn't think of any good reason. I had no choice but to shout firmly. Anyway, no. Okay. Suddenly, Perez, who was left alone, touched the hand that had been holding me a little while ago. Oh boy. And now that his eyes were swiping down, it was obvious that he was sulking now. uh, I had a strong urge to soothe him at the moment, but I clenched my fist and endured it. Get yourself together. He's a kid who knows how to take full advantage of his beauty. Sure enough, I could see Perez glancing at me with his fresh eyes. I opened the window and breathed in the cold air. Well done, well done. I cleared my throat once and said, I'll talk to the butler and give you a suitable guest room. I'd like a room close to here. What the hell are you going to do with a room close here? Tia, Brooke. Paris approached me with his robe, which I sprung to my feet and threw off. It seemed that he had regained his usual composure, and he said it again, wrapping it around my shoulders. You'll catch a cold. Be careful. You're the most dangerous thing in this room right now. That was when I tried to say that. Perez's gaze turned towards the tightly closed door. There was a wrinkle in his eyebrows. Perez, I don't think it's dangerous. Perez muttered in an unknown word. Then he slid the door open very quietly. Creak. A small noise came first as if the utensils were bumping into each other. Be quiet so that Tia doesn't wake up. It was my father who pushed a small cart of food and put a finger in his mouth toward the incoming employee. My father definitely said he'd stay in Cheshire until next month. I'm sure Tia will be surprised. My father laughed, and as he was heading to my bedroom, he found me standing blankly by the window. Huh, Tia, you're up. And Perez standing next to me. Why are you two together at this hour? Obviously, it was a question, but it wasn't. I've never seen such a face of my father. My father, who always smiles, has such a scary face. Oh, Dad, that's. I tried to explain, but my father's sharp eyes were directed at Perez, not me. Explain, Your Highness, the second prince. Looking to the side after my father, I faced another sight. Lord Lombardi. It was the appearance of a bewildered Perez sweating. End of chapter 185.